Hello, everyone. Most of you know what happened to Parler and how they got taken down a couple weeks ago. So I wanted to do this video with a network from a network perspective. And what are some considerations or even some options on building an infrastructure for small business to even medium-sized businesses? I've been in information technology for some years now, maybe even longer than some of these big tech companies been around. Although, really, I never had an interest on some of these social media platforms. It wasn't until last year when I started my business. As I created my social media accounts for the first time on some of these big tech companies, I started seeing the dependency many businesses have on some of these platforms. So I don't know about you guys, but I'm all about options. That is when I downloaded Parler and I created an account, started using it. A few days later, it gets shut down. Wow. I started asking myself a few questions. Big companies have the budget to create backup and disaster plans, even assign an entire team to create, big sophisticated plans on data centers. But what about medium companies? What about small companies? Before we answer that question, let's think about a little bit about today's network infrastructure. If you've been in tech, then you've heard of terms like virtualization, cloud computing, serverless technologies. I remember when I built my first ESXi server, and I was thrilled to be able to have different virtual machines all in one server. Don't get me wrong, I still think these are cool, but just because they're cool doesn't mean they provide the safety and redundancy for today's business needs. I think it's time to reconsider how a business builds their infrastructure. By this, I don't mean completely stop using the cloud or eliminate serverless technology. Well, if either one of those puts your business in a situation where someone else can hit the off button and shut down your services completely, then you might want to reconsider. Come on, we all know where there's dependency on one company and a monopoly, there is danger. I started thinking about this, and it reminds me a lot of a documentary I saw. I don't want to get into too much details, but there's a documentary called The Century of the Self, and it talks about how big companies, people in power, start using their power to control the masses. Well, I don't know where things are heading, but we definitely need some consideration um, with some of this stuff. Nowadays, we want to do everything so quickly. It's like, why build a bare metal server, right? If we can spin up a VPS in a matter of minutes. Again, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it's wrong. But let's give the network design portion a little bit more thought. I will need to build a VPS in a few days myself. And for example, have you ever thought if you could export your VPS from the cloud? I'm not sure about other hosting providers, but here's some of the requirements for the AWS and what is needed to export your VM. Let's take a look at that. I won't go through this whole thing, but here, as you can see, here's some exporting images and volumes is subject to the following limitations. I'll start reading from here. It reads, you cannot export an image if it contains third-party software provided by AWS. For example, VM export cannot export Windows or SQL Server images or any image created from an image in the AWS marketplace. Well, I would say that's a huge percentage of all the VPSs that are out there. I mean, hopefully you get my drift. But where I'm going with this is we have to think about this a little bit more. I believe with uh, these VPSs, if you have uploaded a an image or a VM from your virtual environment to AWS, then it gives you more options. I believe it is then where you can download it with at least less limitations. And I mean, these are the type of things that we need to start thinking about. Going back to Parler, I'm sure they have had many discussions on this topic the last few days, and they probably been trying to decide whether they build from scratch, create their own data center, or do they host in the cloud? It's going to be interesting where they go from here. But speaking of that, if this video ever makes it to the eyes or ears of John Matsey, Tista Tech would donate 100 hours to assist in the rebuild of your network infrastructure. Hey, maybe Parler can one day share their lesson learned with all of us, as we all can benefit from adding redundancy to our network infrastructure or looking at some options that are out there. All right, until next time, guys, please subscribe, comment below.